Andy.
Check my teeth. Good.
You're good. Andy.
Yes, Bambos.
We have Bob Deutsch.
Boy, do we got Bob Deutsch.
For the third time running.
Third time, Bobby Deutsch joining us.
And we're going to discuss creativity.
Creativity.
And we're going to do that on
a wonderful chaos.
So for those of you who are wondering why am I wearing these glasses, I've been working the whole day in front of my screen. I did not go out to enjoy the beautiful weather, even though I really wanted to. These protect my eyes.
Nice. Why don't you just tell them that you're a big fan of Bono and you just want it to look like Bono?
That too. So Bob Deutsch, Andy, this is the third time
we're having
on the show.
What's intuition? Bobby loves talking about intuition. He loves talking about the great minds of today, how they come up with their ideas. So we've done 2 shows with him. And 2 hours ago, I called him. I woke him up. Let's be honest. It was
where is he
it was an hour ago. He's in California, and he was sleeping. So I woke him up, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to join you." So that was that. So he decided to join us today. It's very nice of him.
He also acknowledged that he's a secret watcher. He never.
Yes.
I don't.
He never comments. He doesn't comment, but he shows up. He's like one of these, I don't know what you call them, the stalkers on Facebook that they look at your posts, but they never make comments, right? I think there's a term for that. But so
silent stalkers.
I think we should talk for about 20 to 30 minutes before Bob comes on, because when he comes on, we're going to have a hard time getting the word in edgewise. He's probably the only person that talks more than I do.
I like that.
We're going to bring him on. Look at him. Feisting to get on. Hey, Bob.
The man, the legend.
The myth.
Bob Deutsch.
Bobby Deutsch.
So Bob, creativity, like what on earth? Why would you want to talk about this for a whole hour?
Yeah, and why have you been studying it for a decade?
Well, first of all, as Andy said, at 7:04 my time this morning, the good-for-nothing maniac calls me up. We need you to fill in. I thought, maybe it's a construction site or something. I don't know. And he said, "What do you want to talk about?" I said, "Well, I could talk about anything. Tell me what you want to talk about, and I'll show up."
This was your idea.
It was totally my idea. I closed my eyes and I said, "Who do I want to talk to today?"
No, I meant the subject.
The subject? I'm not sure if that was my topic. Wasn't it you that told me? No. Bob told me that he saw a show which they found fantastic, where they eavesdropped on Paul McCartney's creative process. And from that show, he was inspired. And he said that he thought it was a great segue into talking about creativity.
Yeah. So how did I get interested in creativity? Well, for many years, I was a consultant to business, mostly marketing. And I was a little frustrated. I could have been wrong, of course, but I myself was frustrated. It's like, well, if you're in marketing, and you should be able to just think on your feet, right?
Yeah.
You don't need everything pre-scripted, planned out, rehearsed. And I particularly don't like rehearsing. That's not necessarily good. It's just me, right? I like what happened this morning, and that's why one of the reasons I said yes is, okay, well, let's do it, And I said, you just take what's at hand, you know? And the first thing I thought of at 7:04 this morning, other than I was awoken from a dream into a nightmare, was 2 days ago, I saw on this streaming channel, Hulu, there's a program, 6-part program called McCartney 321. And it's an engineer, Ruben, who worked with McCartney, and McCartney standing in front of a mixing board. And they're just having a conversation. And it's like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I mean, it's like really eavesdropping on someone's recollection, at least, of their creative process. And I watched the whole thing in one sitting. And there's many things that came out of it that excited me. But to me, the bottom line on creativity, Sir Paul McCartney had a sentence for. And that sentence is, quote, so much was at the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's amazing. 3,000 songs at the spur of the moment?
Yeah.
How do you relate to that statement, Bob? If anything.
At the spur of the moment, I mean, the way I relate to it, because the work I've been doing on creativity is one, live in or be in feeling,
Andy.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Trust your unconscious. Trust your unconscious. Maybe it's wrong sometimes. Maybe it'll lead you nowhere. But a lot of times, wow.
Translate that for me.
Okay. So when you say trust your unconscious, I'm going to give you a story that happened to me this morning. I'm working through the 3rd book, and the editor sends me back a statement. It says, Andy, there's too much fluff in this chapter. So now I get the book back, and I don't know where to start. And then I'm sitting there, and I'm starting to write, and I'm trying to think and figure it out, and it's going nowhere. And then I write something that I don't even know if it's true or not, because I didn't think it through. I just stated it. And then in the statement of it, I started to write, and it shocked me how true it was, although I didn't know that before I started writing. And the statement was really clear. He said, what is personal responsibility when it comes to a relationship? And then I wrote a fluff piece, and he said, no, get to the point. And then I wrote, well, what it is it's interacting through the lens of love. That's personal responsibility. And if you act through the lens of love, you're taking responsibility in an interaction. Now, I stated it without knowing why I knew it was true, but I knew it was true on a very deep unconscious level. And then I just wrote it. I wrote 5 pages. And what I did is I gave examples. I didn't leave it as a fluff. I said, no, this is what life looks like if you respond from not love. And this is what it looks like when you respond from love. So basically, I showed not only from the intuitive feeling, but actually in the concrete reality of what it looks like. So that would be the flow.
I do want to say that when this book is published, we're going to be reading one title every show, and we're going to be discussing that title.
Wow, that's new to me. Nice.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, Andy, I mean, even A Wonderful Chaos was born from that space.
Of course, Bob has been just saying that to us for ages, and that's why I see he has been enjoying us, is because he sees that we don't know what we're doing, and we're okay with that.
Completely confused, and it's okay.
And it's okay.
Well, I think Andy, your example is a good one. But when you first said it about interact out of love,
yeah,
my mind said, with no intention, it arrived in my mind, right? What is personal responsibility in a relationship? I would answer, just be true to your feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, but I have a trouble with that because, and I'll tell you why, because Bob, you're an asshole. So that would be me being true to my feelings, but it doesn't create an opportunity for us to connect necessarily. That's why I add the love component.
What?
I'm giving an example of how if I followed what you said, it could look like that interaction I just had with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I understand. I understand.
So that's why I call it responsibility, because in responsibility, I see that my intention is always going to be good, even if I share what isn't comfortable for me. So it's not different than what you said, with one caveat, is that it takes responsibility that I can't blame you for my feelings.
Okay, I have a story for you.
Okay. Am I going too faster, by the way?
You're both going too fast.
Yeah, okay. Let's slow it down a little bit.
Before we go on, you gave 2 examples and there were 3 examples and I interrupted you.
Okay.
Do you want to just give us the 3rd example, or is that like gone?
Well, I want to live in the moment. So given what Andy just said, I have a story.
Great.
Let's do it.
It's about chimpanzees. True story.
Looking at Vamos's face.
I was studying chimpanzees.
You.
Yeah.
Who else is in the room, Vamos? Like, how do you come to study chimpanzees? That's the next question.
Yeah,
that's an even more interesting question. How did you come?
Just knowing your whole history.
Yeah.
I started graduate school, and I was offered a list of possible pre-doctoral fellowships I could apply for.
Okay.
So I looked at the list and I picked one, which was the New York Zoological Society, that run the Bronx Zoo in New York City, which is a great zoo, right? Because I was interested in evolution and communication, the evolution of communication, that kind of thing. So I got that pre-doctoral fellowship. I was assigned to a very famous primatologist. And he took me, most of it work was just, I was like a research assistant to him. And his office was in New York City. But he took me on a lot of trips. He took me to Trinidad to study howler monkeys. He took me to Uganda to study red colobus monkeys. And through that association, I met a guy, he was at Bucknell University, and he was a chimpanzee researcher. And he was going off to study chimpanzees. And I said, I want to go study chimpanzees too. So he said, so we discussed it, and I said, my only funding is this fellowship, and it won't cover doing that. He said, well, you asked the people that you're working for now, and maybe you could get some funds from someplace. And I ended up getting some funds, and I went to Tanzania. Okay. So I come upon this area where the chimpanzees are, and my immediate reaction, was to put my hands over my ears, very loud, because the chimpanzee vocalizations go from ooh, 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 ha, to ha, 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 ha. It escalates very quickly. Or that was my word, escalate. maybe it was not that, but that's what I thought. And over the months I was there, I realized that chimpanzees are amazing. They have something like 98 point something % of our genetic code, same thing. And they are in some very significant ways like us. But to my way of thinking, because of the loudness, they have one difference between us that makes a big difference. And that is because they don't have language. They have a vocalization system, but you wouldn't call it a language. Or at least I wouldn't, because I was naive. They have no capacity to say to themselves, no, N-O. That's what you just told me, Andy. Right? You could say, Bob, you're a jerk, but you won't say it for some reason. Right?
I would say, if I could be, you said taking responsibility would mean saying what you feel. And then I said, I would stipulate with love, because if I say how I feel, I could just say to you, Bob, you're a jerk.
Right.
And that doesn't create space for a connection.
Okay.
And my intention would be to create connection. Yeah.
So I was thinking at that moment in the jungle, chimpanzees have no way of saying, no, I'm not going to call him a jerk, for example. Okay. And you could have whatever reason, And then I had an idea. I went to study if chimpanzees have parting rituals, because every known human culture and chimpanzees are known to have greeting rituals. Mm-hmm. But no one studied if chimpanzees had parting rituals. So I studied that, because I'm interested in endings to anything. Mm. Okay. And I discovered I actually made films and studied it frame by frame and, that kind of stuff. And my conclusion was chimpanzees do have a parting ritual, right? But then I thought, why would any organism have a parting ritual unless they had a concept of future? A future in which you're going to be absent from each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you have to say goodbye because we're not going to see each other for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I made a leap that most scientists don't like, but I like. I said, if chimpanzees have a concept of future, then they're capable of love. Because to have an idea of a person in the future could be a minute from now or years from now, that you're concerned with, mm-hmm. That's an aspect of personal responsibility to that relationship. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's how I ended up studying chimpanzees. And I wrote an article, Chimpanzees Can't Say No, which has big implications in terms of the difference between Homo sapien and chimpanzees. But what I meant by saying earlier, trust your unconscious. I've heard that from a lot of people, very creative people who I've interviewed. Meaning, you don't know exactly where you're going with anything. Some of it turns out to be a wash. And maybe somewhere there's a little nugget. And you go for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't find it, and sometimes you do. Right?
Yeah, I think that's the misconception, is that people think because they see the outcome, they don't see the process of getting there. and that it's really throwing spaghetti against a wall, trusting that some of that spaghetti is going to stick, as opposed to saying, oh, everything I create is going to be genius.
Now, I think this is very true.
Being present, you mean?
No, well, the idea being, like, I've noticed, for instance, when I feel, I'll often say to Bambos, when I'm in the state, I feel like I'm channeling. So I'm not writing, I create conditions around me, and then all of a sudden I'm taken over and it just starts to happen. And then later I look at it and I say, okay, how is this? But some of it is not stuff that I like and other stuff I like. So it's more the doing of it is the creativity.
You know, I say when a person is in a creative act, let's call it, they're more a witness than a director.
Yeah.
You know, you just
they're more a witness than a director. It sounds
they're
like
a witness to themselves.
It's moving through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I just described exactly. I don't feel like when I'm in the creative state, I'm creating. I feel like it's created and I'm just observing as it's happening.
And you know why that happens?
I have a story, but I have no idea why that happens.
Yeah, me too.
So I have a hunch about this. And I have a hunch from the great comedian and cultural commentator, let's call him.
George Carlin?
George Carlin.
Great.
Yeah.
Didn't know you were going to say his name, but he's a legend.
Yeah. Now, I never met him, sorry to say. But I saw a video of him on YouTube where he was not doing one of his routines. He actually was talking about, in a serious way, how he came up with ideas.
Mm.
And it's amazing. Amazing. To me, it's amazing because what he described, unbeknownst to him, because he's not a neuroscientist, is he was discussing or describing metaphor.
Yeah.
So he says, I'm paraphrasing now. I see something or I hear something, and I go, ooh. You know, it stops me, it excites me, or it disgusts me, but I have a reaction, right? So, okay, that's my first registration, I think he calls it. Then I might write it down, longhand. Then I'll write it in my computer. That's the third registration, you know. And then when I think about it, my mind has already connected those registrations to what's already in my mind, made through not the literal correspondence between those things, but the emotional correspondence.
Yeah.
Now that's metaphor. The mind if you let the mind be, it makes metaphor.
I'd love to slow this down and talk a little bit about our intros for shows, because like Bombos and he'll call me sometimes, how about this show idea or that show idea, and then when the show hits, it's always like, oh, that's it. I feel emotionally that's the idea that either creates a discomfort or has some charge in it, where I feel like there's something deeper here that we can dig into.
Yeah. And it's emotion.
And it's always emotion. I think today we had a call and he said, you know, I'm looking maybe to have someone come on the show, and it was more of a job to discuss, like, at least that's the way I perceived it, because I didn't go into deep discussion. And I was like, no, we're not going to have that, because there's nothing emotional in it that I can connect to. And then find an interest to ask questions.
Yeah.
But so so when we'll do the show intros, a lot of times as I describe people who I haven't met before, know very little about, but I've seen them. I wrote their name in the computer. I typed out the show intro. So I did similar to what you're saying, the George Carlin process. I've primed my mind already before the show begins with an emotion and a story around it that I now feel comfortable diving into.
Yeah. And another interesting thing about that is if you write it directly into your computer, then your fingers are touching the keyboard.
Yeah.
Right. And that could work. Okay. But if, as George Carlin referred to, and he didn't do it with that intention, but he referred to, before he put it into his computer, he wrote it down longhand. We know this about the brain, because of muscle memory and all this kind of stuff. If you're writing a sentence, I love Jane, versus typing it on a computer, your brain relates to it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Because you're already once removed through technology.
Yeah, it's the same when I did the Last Letter tour. I asked people, they said, can I write it, texting it? I said, if you write it, you'll see that in some cases it'll impact you more because you'll feel more connected to the words you're writing.
Yeah.
So it often had a more powerful impact that way.
Yeah, I also experienced keyboards is a little bit detaching from the core. And when I'm writing, it feels like I'm really connected to the heart and there's emotion there.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Bob,
So,
I met
one other thing.
Yep, no, Bombas, let him talk because he'll fill the hour for us. So just sit. Let's us get comfortable.
In relation to Paul McCartney.
Okay.
This is my supposition. It could be wrong. When you're working on something that's truly organically generated and meaningful to you, you're not just doing it as a job, right? More than in other cases, your mind will work on your behalf. That's amazing.
Yeah. Slow down there a second, because you're saying something. I wrote a word down earlier, and I use this word all the time. And I say, if I focus on the conditions, the emergence will come. The emergence will. If the conditions around me aren't there, the emergence doesn't come. And what I mean by that is, if I'm not at peace with where I am and what I'm doing and feeling in love with the process, then the struggle comes in and the creativity goes away.
Exactly. You got it. That's it.
Yeah. So I often will try to say, listen, don't focus on an outcome, focus on the conditions. And if the conditions are right, you'll see there's a likelihood that the emergence occurs. You can't be guaranteed. It doesn't work that way. But if the conditions are shit, it's really hard for that creativity to just, show up.
And if you just focus on doing, that's not good.
Also
that's not good.
No.
Like I once, through certain emotional associations, was thinking about Martha Stewart, the TV cook, and and she's good, and a lot of people love her. I don't like her. I don't like other people saying they like her, because they abdicate responsibility. They say, I'm just going to use her recipe. I'm going to go in the kitchen.
Slow down. You've confused both of us, because it's very infrequent that we look at one another in confusion. So what does not liking Martha Stewart have anything to do with abdicating your responsibility? What does that mean?
Because people who follow her, if you just follow someone's recipe,
okay,
there's no feeling involved, personal feeling. It's just You're reading, being directed, and you listen and you do it.
Okay.
And the focus is on the outcome. The focus is on listening to your commander.
Yeah.
And your focus is not on the doer, you.
This is really beautiful what you're saying. I was even thinking, was it yesterday? Yesterday, about the act of lovemaking. You can read books and look at different intimacy positions, right? And you can try to imitate them. But if you don't bring yourself into those positions and bring your heart in the intention and make it your own, then you're pretty much being a robot.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, go left. Okay, and I'm going to go right, as opposed to closing your eyes and allowing it to take you and help and kind of discovering yourself through it.
But let me ask a question about this, though. Are you saying that you don't like Martha Stewart as a person, or are you saying I don't like the idea of Martha Stewart?
He doesn't like people liking her, copying her.
I'm not talking about Martha Stewart as a person. She's great.
Okay, finally, I'm with you now. I'm sorry. The whole time I'm thinking you're hating on Martha Stewart, and I can't understand why. You don't like the idea that basically people are losing their creativity because they're outsourcing it to somebody who got the joy of discovery.
Right.
So she gets all the joy of the discovery. She dribbles out a few recipes, and then you copy her, and you actually don't get to live whatever that creativity was that she got to live.
Yeah. I mean, that's fine if you do it sometimes. But if you only do that, and afraid to just see how things go, if you experiment in your kitchen,
we would have never had pineapple and ham on a pizza if that didn't happen.
Well, that would be a good thing.
No. Bob, is everyone capable of creativity?
Absolutely.
Okay, one second here.
Every personal quality that a person needs to be creative is already in them as a person, right?
We've kind of said, though, that they have to be in flow, and not everyone has the capacity to have that surrender in them.
Yeah, so I'll tell you how I think about this. I think about it in terms of temperament. So temperament is something that comes before experience, that comes before personality. It's when you come out of your mommy's womb and you take your first breath after someone slaps you on the backside, you have a temperament. And you could see it. I've done this, in graduate school. I was in a medical school. So I would go early to the school, and I would go down to see the newborn room where all the kids are in their little bassinets, and they have like 40, 50 newborns. And you're standing outside looking through the glass. And you could tell by how they move, how they cry, how they moan, how they would do whatever they're doing. They're completely different already.
Yeah.
Rhythmicity is different. Intensity is different. And I think the world can be divided in a lot of ways. People, I'm talking about. But one way to divide everybody in terms of temperament is glass half full, glass half empty. That's a underlying attitude.
I would also say I kind of use those predispositions. I would say seeking pain or avoiding pain or seeking pleasure. Would you see that similarly as a archetype that would layer over what you half empty, half full?
Somewhat. Glass half empty, in my experience after 30 years of interviewing people, those people tend to be cynical. And by cynical, I mean they have an expectation that things are going to turn out bad.
Mm.
That's cynicism. Cynicism is the death of creativity.
Yeah.
Period. That's it.
But there are people who are like, they think that things are going to turn out bad, and then they write songs about that, and then they become legendary.
Well, that's fine. Then they're into their process.
Okay.
I mean, Sir Paul talks about, this is interesting too. He said he came from a happy home. There was love, there was music. His father was a pianist. People used to come to his house and they used to have sing-alongs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, he says, this is part of me. I'm basically a happy, optimistic person.
Yeah.
So I would come into the studio and I would have something half worked out about a song, and it's a love song. And I would play it on my guitar or my piano for John, and John would say, "Love sucks," you know, because John had a hard early life.
Yeah.
But Paul goes on to say, we were lucky. The two of us had different temperaments. He didn't use that word, but different points of view about life. But when we brought them together, we made something new that each of us didn't bring in ourselves.
Yeah.
And that was the gift. That was the luck. That's the serendipity.
Yeah. There was a beautiful TED Talk, which I put on a Wonderful Chaos board today. And I can't remember, but was what this narrator who does a lot of radio shows learned from Dolly Parton. And what he said was he used to narrate all of the shows the same way, which was color a context at the beginning of the show and then round up with a lesson. And he said he did that so many times he got bored with it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the complexity of life wasn't being addressed because things weren't being agreed upon. And yet he was still trying to find agreeable endings.
Yes.
And then he said what he did and what Dolly Parton helped him sort of discover was that you could bring in two very, very different elements and allow the question of not knowing be okay with the resolve of hope, of course, because by bringing two people together, there's something new that emerges. And I found that really beautiful.
And that's a major constituent of creativity to me. Number one is sensuality. Feel what you feel.
Yeah.
Number two is metaphor. Number three is paradox.
Yeah.
Bring opposites together. You know, and the great sentence I have about that is from Wynton Marsalis. He said, jazz is a combination of the raucousness of Saturday night and the piety of Sunday morning. And you
Beautiful.
need that you need that tension.
The juxtaposition.
Yeah. And you once you have it, you have to work with it to find something underneath it, under the hood of it. That's not evident on the surface.
Yeah.
You know? And look at McCartney. I mean, for example, the song Yesterday, right?
All my troubles were so far away, Bob.
What's that?
I said all my troubles were so far away.
Right. I mean, the interesting thing about that song, other than it's being quite an amazing song, is he woke up from sleep and he had those words and the chord progression already in his head. It was just there. So what's that? Who knows?
Yeah.
You know? But Paul does say, which is an interesting point too, he says because of his home, his early childhood home, that was always filled with music, right? He was exposed to a lot of music and a lot of different kinds of music. And he had that memory the repertoire of those memories to always go back to or fall back on or something like that, you know, to use or to reject something.
Yeah.
You know?
Before you go any further, I want Bombos to ask a question because he's been sort of lingering there with something in his eyes that I haven't quite got to hear yet.
No.
See, you could be wrong about your intuition.
No, I was just hoping to see if I could. I had a lot of questions, but I thought if I gave some airtime that I could sort of reach deep and get some deepening questions that Bombos always comes up with.
But we're really talking about living and being in a state, constant state, moment to moment, of recognizing what you feel. And I think there's a double layer to feeling in terms of creativity. You have to recognize what you're feeling at the moment and recognizing how you feel about your feeling.
Yeah.
And when you do that,
being present.
I once was thinking maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was thinking, well, I have a number of points about creativity, and maybe I could relate them to different phrases or sentences in Beatles music. You know?
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought of was, if you're working on something that's organically authentic and genuine to you, that you have a passion about, your mind will work on it by itself.
Yeah.
Just let your mind be, right? Let it be. And if that happens, then ideas could come from anywhere, even through the bathroom window.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it really works like that.
Yeah, totally. You know, I was thinking part of you mentioned the quote from the Paul McCartney series that you watched. And I don't know if you've stated it yet, but you said things happen in the spur of the moment. That there's a lot of it that's not thought out. And I thought of two instances in music, which when I heard them, then it just made me laugh because the music was so iconic and there was so much meaning given to it that when you heard how it was created, you didn't realize the serendipity nature of it. One of them was the song "Sweet Emotion" by Aerosmith. Mm-hmm. And I saw an interview with the lead singer. Now I can't remember his name, but basically there's this
Tyler?
Yeah, Steven Tyler. And there was the song has this like this song that's sort of like a low, like it almost sounds like a conga of some sort. And he said when they were doing the song, there was just they felt like there was something missing. Like there was something that they needed here and he didn't know what it was. And then he looked down and then there was the coffee. And then he had one of those sugar packets in paper. And the actual song on that song is him shaking the sugar packet against the microphone with jacked up very high. So you're listening to that.
That's a fantastic example. I never heard that before.
Yeah, and it blew my mind because I know that sounds so well. And to think, oh, wow, that it was that serendipity moment that they captured that you'd think, wow, this must have been well thought out. But actually, it was just letting the creativity take over.
Yeah. So two quick vignettes about that. One is not in this program, but I've seen other interviews with McCartney. He was saying he and John were writing the song "She Loves Me," yeah, yeah, yeah. And they used to write songs together. John came to Paul's house because he had a piano there because his father, and he has his guitars and everything. And they used to write songs together in the bathroom because of the acoustics, right?
Yeah.
So they wrote that song, "She Loves Me," yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Paul's father was home, so they went out to the living room. And he said, "Dad, what do you think of this?" And they played the song. And Paul's father said, "I like the song, but why don't you just get rid of that yeah, 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 and say yes, yes, yes." And happily, they didn't listen to him.
Yeah.
And one other thing like that, I've written about this. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Right. They brought in someone who they knew, who they respected and liked a lot, and she was a songwriter. So they were playing a song for her, and she said, "I like the song, but I don't like this constant refrain you have." And the refrain was "ba-dee-ya, ba-dee-ya, ba-dee-ya." So one of the musicians on Earth, Wind, and Fire said, quote, "Never let a lyric get in the way of a groove." Now that's an amazing sentence to me. It's like, never let logic get in the way of emotion.
Yeah. Fun fact, Bombos, I was taught how to play the saxophone by someone that was a saxophonist in Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Really? Wow.
First lesson, he looked at my saxophone and said, "This is so shit. I'm not going to teach you." And he took me right to the music store. And that was my first lesson, was if you're going to play on an instrument that you should be playing on.
Yeah.
Was that the same saxophone where your neighbor complained?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Got you.
I have another fun story for you.
One second. We should say one thing about everything we've been talking about, because we're constantly referring to music and musicians.
Yes.
That's a special domain to me. I think to everyone. Music, I say there's only two things in human experience that completely bypass frontal lobe intellectual processing and go directly to emotion. Only two things: love and music. So music is this very special thing. And of course, the primal basis of music is rhythm. Even there's a ritual in a primitive tribe in New Guinea called Totem Head. And they bring the teenagers in a circle, and they sit around, male, female, male, female, male, female, and they're playing some percussion instruments, like wood, banging on wood or something. And then they go around the circle, and one couple, let's say, one couple, a male and female, have to touch foreheads and rotate while still in contact to the beat of the music. Okay, then they go to the next couple, and they do that. And the next couple, and they do that. Then they ask privately individuals around the circle, who did you feel you had a comfortable forehead experience with? Right? And only if a male and a female both say, "Oh, I like Jane," and Jane says, "I like Harry," right? Do they allow those two to get married?
Wow.
I mean, rhythm is so, and it's both literal and it's metaphorical, right? I mean, look at George Harrison. You know, there's something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover. That's it.
He's taking me back to memory land.
Yes.
I mean, it's memory lane, but the interesting thing about Beatles music is it will last forever. Very few things last forever.
And this podcast.
Yeah.
Bob, what do you have to say with, like, I always see art as a person being in their darkest and a person being in their lightest. So I've seen people like who go through a contraction, so they're not in surrender, but then they'll take a paintbrush and all of a sudden they're splattering on a canvas and they put everything out. And normally the painting in my eyes is quite dark.
And what's the question?
Well, I don't see them being in surrender. I see them being in the tension.
How do you explain that?
Oh, well, my first answer is I don't know. My second answer is a personal answer. And it might just be idiosyncratic to me or some people, but not necessarily all people. I came about explicitly, let's say around 8 years ago, to say I'm going to devote my time to studying what really is creativity. Now, why did I do that? And my answer is I was angry. I was angry about so many interactions I had in business consulting. That people were supposedly had creative jobs and they were anti-creative.
Yeah.
And it actually, maybe inappropriately, but made me angry. And I said, the hell with this. I'm gonna find out the other way. Now, on the other side of that coin, there is a mythology or a belief, a common belief that to be creative, you have to be neurotic or something, you know. I do not think that's true. I think the great creativity breakthroughs come from fun and joy. And the Beatles are a great example. They say, even in the worst of times when they were, thinking about breaking up and just arguing about business issues and shit like that, they look back and they said, the great thing was we were having fun. And half the time we didn't even know what we were doing.
Yeah.
Even Ringo said recently, it's interesting. He says, when we're interviewed, when Paul and I are interviewed now, like late 70s, early 80s in age, and we're asked to think back, our happiest times were when at the beginning, when we weren't famous, and we were playing little clubs to 50 people. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And it was grand. Yeah. Like people say to me, given I'm not 18 or 38, they say, well, Bob, when are you going to retire? I said, well, I don't know how to think about that because I never worked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what basically I've said, with my wife is that I'll never retire because I'm only doing what I love. So why would I stop doing what I love?
Yeah. I mean, it gives you energy. It doesn't drain you of energy.
Yeah.
Unless someone calls you at 7 o'clock in the morning and wakes you up.
Exactly. But it's me. I mean, come on. It's like family now.
Right. Well, I mean, if I would have had that call from a lot of people, I would say, no, thank you.
Thank you for that. There was I'd like to highlight another song, which also is become iconic for me, and it was on a coincidence. And it was Jane's Addiction song, Been Caught Stealing.
Say again?
A group called Jane's Addiction.
Okay, I don't know that.
It's a bit too hardcore for you, I imagine. It's a 80s grungy hard. And they had a dog, and the dog was in the studio. And when they started playing, the dog would start barking, but the dog would bark in synchronized to a lot of the beats.
Oh, sure.
So the dog bark is in the actual song, and it makes the song so much nicer because it's almost this background tense, like guard dog feel to that song. And it was interesting because when they asked, how that came about, it was very, very much the same as the dog started barking. And then they thought, wow, this actually sounds like it could be something. And then they just left it in the song.
Absolutely. That's it. I mean, I call that real life.
Yeah.
There's something we haven't spoken about, actually, and that is, since we're talking about musicians, I'm thinking of Jim Morrison, and if you know his life, he took a lot of hallucinogenics, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of his creativity came from writing poetry in that state.
Yeah. And same with the Beatles. When the Beatles went to India, I mean, another thing to be said about creativity and the Beatles is when they were already famous doing what they were doing and making bundles of money, they just changed what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, they weren't trying to follow a recipe.
Yeah. Yeah.
They reinvented themselves over and over and over again.
Yeah. And that was conscious.
Yeah.
Like I think Paul once made mention, not in this program I just saw, but in past interviews I've seen. They liked the music of the Supremes, but they knew they never wanted to do that because it was a formula.
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, to be creative, truly, you have to be in a constant state of becoming. Nothing is done. Nothing is finished. Nothing is closed.
I've been using a word often on the show that makes Bombos tease me, and the word is
awe.
What is it?
Awe.
Or I also say wonder.
Oh, yeah, wonder.
Wonder. Like I'll say, like, if I'm not in a state of wonder, then basically I'm looking at things as if I already know what I'm seeing, and then there's nothing new that arises. So that wondrous state is exactly the thing that creates a opportunity to re-see something that I think I already know.
So actually getting out of your head and taking away the labels and allowing your brain to see the world through the lens of not knowing.
Yeah.
5 years old, Bob.
And it's not only not knowing, it's just I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's the honest fact is I don't know. Like I'm admitting it to myself so that I'm not trying to create a reality over and over again, thinking that I know.
Yeah. Like when I write, many things I write I know what I want to write. I know how to build the argument for it. I know how to write an interpretation of my own interpretation of what it is. And let's say that could still be good. Sometimes it's not, but it can still be good. But there's a different experience that seldom comes, but when it comes, I'm talking about in writing, it's amazing. And that is, you don't know exactly what you're going to write. And you end up, moving your fingers on the keyboard, and some of it is top of mind, I would call it.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you see a sentence on your computer that you just put there, and you say, "Holy crow! I never knew I thought that."
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
And that to me is the experience of the eternal in the current moment.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And there's no higher experience.
Yeah.
There is no higher experience.
Yeah, that's the sweetness of having Bola Long and Bambos nearby, because a lot of times they'll quote back to me things that I've said, and I get the joy of listening to like the things that I didn't even like realize that I had said, like, oh my God, that's really a wonderful thing. Like, you know, the consequences of an unexamined life will be seen on the deathbed or something.
And there's another thing that Paul brings up, which I find, just from the point of view of cognition, very interesting. So he said when he's, let's say, trying to write a song, and he'll come to a point in the song where he doesn't have the words, but he says he can't leave it blank. So he puts a phrase in there that has no meaning to the song. You know, it could be, I'm making up an answer. You know, he's writing a love song, and he comes to a point where he doesn't know what to write, but he needs to hold that space. He can't leave it blank, because if he leaves it blank, it'll be lost. The whole feeling will be lost of what he's into now.
Yeah.
So he writes any phrase like, I like spaghetti and meatballs. Literally, something
random,
really late, just to hold the place.
Yeah.
That is a fascinating thing in terms of cognition.
Isn't it? Yeah, the word I think they use for that is often anchoring. They're anchoring emotion or something in that place so that you can always connect back to that, the anchor that you set.
For it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go through the whole history and story of the Beatles and learn everything you need to know about creativity.
Yeah, we've got a connoisseur of this who teaches a class on the Beatles at the university somewhere in Israel. And if you'd like us to make that contact with you, he's a fanatic about the Beatles, and he's taught courses on it for years now. So we'd be happy to make that intro for you.
Thank you. I love that.
He's been on the show before as well.
Yeah.
We've gone over our hour, as we always do with you.
Really? We didn't even say anything yet.
And I didn't think we were going to get through a show without you saying Bruce Springsteen. So this is a shocker. This is a shocker. We got through the entire show and Bruce Springsteen's story didn't come up.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to take over. Give me a story.
I can give you a story.
I know you will. So thank you for picking up the phone at 7 a.m. for me. I'm very grateful that you actually made time for us today to fill the hole that was left.
Well, I've never experienced doing your shows with you guys as making time for it. I relate to it as, ooh, this is fun.
Yeah. Well, let's just say you picked up the phone at 7 o'clock. I don't know if there's many people I'd pick up the phone for at 7 o'clock. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Love you, Bob.
Take care. Good to see you.
You too. Bye. Creativity. That was nice. I don't know, when I went through this show, I felt a lot of the kind of meditating and feeling into the state. And it really felt nice. Did you have that experience at all as well, or is that just?
I think there's going to be a nice podcast once it's edited.
That's what I felt. Yeah, I felt like there was really nice things coming up that I really enjoyed, and it felt a bit meditative for me even. So even that was really a sweet.
You like when I was staring and you said, "Do you have a question?" That will be the word. I was really present with him, and he's also a joy for me to look at him.
Yeah, isn't he just? He puts a smile on my face each time we see him. We have a funny topic.
242 episodes, guys. Tomorrow is starting a business with my best friend, with Christine, Dobbs, and Amanda. Is it a duet?
It's a duet. And
We're having a duet.
They basically decided to start a business together. And I thought, how cool is it? Because we all know that we're like friends, and then we start business, and then all of a sudden shit goes south. So I said, are you guys ready to come on to discuss the journey from, hey, let's just try this, to how we're getting through the struggles, finances, how we divvy up money, who's doing one thing and not another. Like, how is that process going? They said they were going to share that with us on the show.
And on Friday, mental strength and resilience with Carrie Howell.
Yeah. Carrie is someone who was in the military, a lot of PTSD, and he started doing model making very, very, what would you call them? Detailed models. And through that process, he discovered resilience. And so I thought, wow, let's hear that journey, because it just sounded like a very interesting, intriguing discovery process using model making to discover resilience.
Beautiful.
So
see you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
5 p.m. Central European Time on
A Wonderful Chaos.